Hello, I'm Danny Potts. I'm a neurologist here in Tuscaloosa at the VA and affiliate faculty at the University of Alabama. And I want to talk to you some about memory, art, and personhood. And I want to give a little talk it's a part of the Kentucky Art Museum's Mystic Chords of Memory exhibit, one of their summer exhibits that I hope you get a chance to go and see to see some of the amazing artwork that they have at the Kentucky Museum. This topic is particularly important to me because not only am I a neurologist, but my dad had Alzheimer's disease and became an artist, or I should say discovered his art in the throes of that condition. So I'm very, very interested in what art tells us about the brain and how we remember and in how we sort of build up our sense of self through art making and creativity. So follow with me a little bit today as we talk about memory, art, and personhood. So what I want to start with is to talk a little bit about the neuroscience of memory, a little bit about how memory works. It's a very, of course, important part of being a human being. I want to talk a little bit about how we forget, and specifically about some of the forgetting associated with Alzheimer's disease. I want to talk about why artistic engagement is important for people that are living with dementia especially, but is important for all of us. And then I want to talk a little bit about how these mystic chords of memory, so to speak, can flow through our creativity and our art viewing and our art making and basically enrich our lives. So let's review a little bit about memory, and we'll start with a little bit with the neuroscience of memory. Memory is divided up in several ways, and really it has to do with the amount of time that we remember things. For instance, we have a very brief component of memory that literally remembers sensations and very brief milliseconds worth of information that we really don't save into long-term memory. So those are sights, sounds, things that we encounter all the time, but we really don't pay much attention to. Then there's short-term memory, working memory we call it, which is a little bit longer, and we hold on to it long enough to work with it, process it a little bit, file it, discard it, sort of work with it like you would at your workstation. Long-term memory is composed of memories that we pay attention to, things that we value that are meaningful, and things that we process into a more hardwired sort of situation in the brain. With long-term memory, we have basically two types. We have declarative memory and non-declarative memory. Declarative memory is called explicit memory, and non-declarative memory is called implicit memory. When we talk about declarative memory, we are talking about memories that we're conscious of and that we can verbally express. And this is divided up into learned facts or semantic memory, and also experienced events or episodic memory. So again, we're talking about long-term memory, two types, declarative and non-declarative. Declarative memory consists of semantic memory, learned facts, and episodic memory, which is experienced facts. We can consciously assess declarative memory, talk about it, verbalize it. Non-declarative memory, or so-called implicit memory, cannot be verbally accessed, and it tends to be non-conscious or subconscious memory. When we remember how to ride a bike, that procedure of riding a bike, we're actually accessing this implicit or non-declarative memory. So when we form new memories, we have several processes at work. First of all, we have to pay attention to new information. Then we encode that information, the meaning of the information, the emotion associated with the information, and the sights, sounds, smells, and other sensory input that we've paid attention to. We encode that into neural activity. And then this neural activity is consolidated and saved and stored. So we have encoding, consolidation, and then storage, and then we have retrieval. So we can go back to this information that we've restored, can retrieve it, we can call it up. And certain parts of the brain are involved in this process. One of the most important parts of the brain for all of this is the hippocampus, so called because it resembles a seahorse. And this little seahorse is located in both sides of the brain in the temporal lobes, right under in the undersurface, the middle surface of the temporal lobes. And the hippocampus is the memory weaver or the save button in our brains. So the hippocampus takes new information that has come in, weaves it together, encodes it, and sends it out to other parts of the brain in a retrievable network, so that when we remember things over and over and over again, we are activating this memory weave or memory fabric that the hippocampus has created. And that's how we can create long-term memories and store them. The prefrontal cortex, which is right up here, attends us to the present moment. This is our present moment awareness, and this is where our working memory is located. So the workstation, the things that we need to do to live our lives in the present moment. We can hold about 7 to 9, 5 to 9 actually, 7 plus or minus 2 items in our working memory for about 15 to 30 seconds, and that's about all we can hold. The amygdala, which is a very small part of the brain, kind of close to the hippocampus, is involved in emotion. And the amygdala, when activated, tells the hippocampus what to remember. It tells the hippocampus, hey, this is important, we better remember this and put it in long-term memory. So these are some structures that we really rely on a lot when we remember things. So meaning matters for memory. So in other words, things that are meaningful, things that are important, things that capture our attention, that capture our emotions, those are the things we're more likely to remember. When we perceive something and we pay attention to it, we're more likely to remember it. The hippocampus saves all this information and consolidates it and puts it in our memory. Now, autobiographical memory is episodic memories, so these are events that have happened over a lifetime. And most of this is housed in the right hemisphere, and we go back over these things when we think about who we are and the experiences we've had in our lives. Autobiographical memory is accessed through art making, through creativity, through music, through reminiscence. And when we access our autobiographical memory, we are shoring up our sense of self. Now that becomes important when we are talking about people living with dementia, because one of the ways that art is so effective with people living with dementia is that we access the autobiographical memory and we remind ourselves of who we are and those relationships that are important to us. Relational memory is memory for relationships amongst the elements of an experience. So if, for instance, if I was at my grandmother's house when she was cooking breakfast, I associate the biscuits and the coffee and the eggs and all of that together to form a relational memory. The context of memory is very, very important. The context in which we remember something. And actually, when we remember something, we remember all of that, the context, the smell, the time frame in which the event happened. And if we tap into any part of that, we can help bring up the memory. So in other words, if we're somewhere and we smell biscuits cooking, then we can be transported back to Grandmama's kitchen and be thinking about the lovely experience that we had with her having breakfast. Remembering is reactivating, reconsolidating, rewriting, and resaving. An important point here is that when we remember an event and re-remember that event, the next time we remember it, we are not remembering the original event. We are remembering our rewrite of the event. So that's interesting. So remember, I use that term, remember, when we are remembering and re-remembering an event, we are not actually going back to the initial event and the initial memory. we are remembering our last rewrite of the memory, which is a very interesting concept. Sleep is very important. Sleep helps us consolidate memories. So it's very, very important to sleep on something that you want to remember. If we repeat and if we add meaning to information, we can remember it better. So when we talk about Alzheimer's and we talk about the memory loss associated with Alzheimer's disease, we see that the earliest problem is the loss of episodic memory. So we have difficulty remembering new information, things that's happening over a period of time. We also do not consolidate and save these memories. So the save button is not working because the hippocampus, the save button, the memory weaver, is being damaged by Alzheimer's disease. We then have the loss of semantic memory. So we lose information. We lose the ability to name things. We're not verbally as fluent, and we can't categorize things as well. Working memory declines next. That's our workstation of memories that we use to conduct our lives. Now, the extent of atrophy in the middle part of the temporal lobe, which is where the hippocampus is located, correlates with the amount of memory loss we have. So when we have Alzheimer's disease, we atrophy or shrink the middle part of our temporal lobes, and as that happens, we begin to lose our abilities to make new memories. So how does art play into all of this? Well, I love the quote from Virgil that's on the One World Center at the site of the 9/11 tragedy. No day shall erase you from the memory of time. I think that this is a powerful concept, and that is that we are remembered and that collective memory may be more important than individual memory. So memory may be more of a social concept than we generally think about, and I think that's powerful to consider. We talk about art. We talk about art's ability to preserve memory, to call up memory, and to weave our autobiographical memory into the present moment. Creativity is chocolate for the brain, said Dr. Gene Cohen, because creativity involves many parts of the brain, and it activates the feel-good parts of the brain, the pleasure centers of the brain, and it makes our brain work better and more smoothly and efficiently. Art facilitates the development and preservation of visuospatial skills. It increases one's ability to create abstractions. It helps to lessen the brain effects of stress. It helps to preserve patience and attention. It helps make connections between unrelated things. It activates our pleasure centers of the brain, as we talked about, and it engenders a state of flow, that state that we go into when we lose time, when we're doing something that's so engaging to us that we can't keep track of time. And the flow state is important for well-being. I've got a slide here that highlights the parts of the brain that are involved in art making or art viewing, and all the parts are highlighted because literally almost every part of the brain is involved in art making, creativity, and art viewing. And so it really ties in a lot of the parts of the brain together. And when I say art, I really am talking about all forms of art: music, dance, movement, drama, visual creativity, poetry, literature, etc. So artistic engagement in people with dementia is important. Art creates meaning for people who are living with dementia. Art creates relationships. It binds people to their culture and to their communities. People who are living with dementia often have an uncanny openness to experiencing art. They're willing to do it. They're more centered in the present moment, maybe less inhibited. So they're willing to have an artistic experience. Art links different parts of the brain together and can bypass verbal insufficiency. So when we can't talk as well, when we can't express our stories as well, we can paint, we can sing, we can move them. Dementia does not dampen the desire to create. People who are living with dementia still want to create. When we perceive art or when we create art, there are certain parts of the brain that are involved with this. And there are two streams, we call them. The dorsal stream, which is the where stream, and the ventral stream, which is the what stream. So the dorsal stream or where stream is located up here in the parietal region of the brain, and it tells us where we've seen something. It locates things in space and helps us to process movement and location. The ventral stream or the what stream is in the temporal lobe, and this tells us what we're looking at, colors, textures, shapes, sizes, where we've seen them, and helps to create a story for what it is that we're seeing. So when we process visual art, the occipital lobe, back in the back part of the brain, sort of separates the different features of what we're looking at. And the parietal lobe coordinates them and links them together. We organize this information in the parietal lobe. And then the right temporal lobe right here helps us to make meaning of what we're seeing. So information comes in its different components to the occipital area. The parietal area helps organize it and locate it all, and the right temporal lobe helps to make meaning of what we're looking at, construct a story about it. The left hemisphere helps to tell about what we're processing. So the left hemisphere provides the commentary for the artistic experience. It's interesting to note that when we look at a piece of art, we are potentially firing off the same parts of our brain that the artist fired off when he or she made the art, which I think is pretty fascinating. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard was very interested in art and its ability to shore up the self. And Kierkegaard felt that by turning inward, we discover ourselves, that humans require coherence, inner and outer coherence, past and future coherence, and that the self is a work of art. And he believed that creativity and art, the primary reason that we do that and that it's important for us, is to bolster this creative sense, is to bolster this sense of self, to help to create our own selfhood by viewing and experiencing and creating art. Art matters, he said, because it assists in the project of selfhood. Art is a mirror for life. And the function of art that is creating the self and preserving the self may be particularly important for people living with dementia because they can have some trouble holding on to their sense of self. Art therapy is a particular type it's a particular sort of a therapeutic approach to art, which involves integrating both mental health and human services in a way that enriches life experience and communities through active art making. It uses the creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience in a psychotherapeutic relationship to help people. Art therapy supports meaning because it bypasses verbal aspects of brain function when somebody can't get the words out anymore, and it aids in communication. It can help with the expression of emotions and the creation of self-image. And one of its most important goals, I think, is to help us to recreate our narrative and process traumatic experiences from early in life, blending them into our current state, and help us make meaning of them. And so this is particularly important when art therapists are working with people who've sustained trauma, people who have PTSD, people who've had traumatic experiences. It even helps people who have a traumatic diagnosis like Alzheimer's disease begin to blend this into the fabric of their personhood so that they're not as emotionally reactive. And so it can be very, very powerful. Art therapy helps to create neuroplasticity in the brain, which means it helps the brain form connections, preserve itself, maybe even grow new nerve cells or neurons in the brain. And thereby it contributes to well-being and a resiliency. It actually can facilitate the creation of a new narrative and a transformed sense of self. So it's really important for people who are living with dementia. So recollection of early memories is important for selfhood and for self-esteem and self-control. And art therapy and creativity helps us to access that part of the brain. Now, when disability limits language, images become even more significant than they were before, both as a means to communicate emotional material and as a means to heal. And so art therapy is very, very important. My father, as I told you, Lester Potts, had Alzheimer's disease and attended adult daycare, Caring Days, here in our community, a wonderful place. Many of you may know about Caring Days. While Dad was there, he learned that he could paint. And he painted over 100 watercolors while he was there. And this literally transformed his life. He went in a broken man, and he came home proud of himself every day because he'd painted beautiful images. These images were helping him tie back into his early childhood years. He painted images of trees, of saws. He was a sawmiller, grew up in Pickens County. Pictures of his father's shoes, hat. He was literally centering himself in the early childhood memories when he was painting. And he's not the only person with Alzheimer's or dementia that has been studied who has created art. Matter of fact, there's some famous artists that had Alzheimer's disease. William Utemolan was one who painted self-portraits both before and after he started developing Alzheimer's disease. And if you look at the images of these self-portraits, which you'll see in this PowerPoint, the face changes so that it's almost unrecognizable as a face toward the end. There's been an analysis done of William Utemolan's art and my dad's art in comparison to see if there are any characteristics of these two Alzheimer's patients' art. And turns out there are characteristics which both of them express, or their art expresses. Both of them painted more abstractly as the disease progressed. Their art was more symbolic as the disease progressed. They displayed less precision and attention to spatial detail, and they were depictively less accurate as the disease progressed. With Dad's art, you see more warmer colors, blues and greens. You see more color saturation, very saturated colors, less complexity as the disease progressed. So it's very interesting to study that. Dad painted themes of his childhood over and over, and you'll see on this slide that Dad used to build birdhouses for people in the community before he got Alzheimer's disease, and after he got Alzheimer's disease and started painting, he painted the birdhouses. So you see a birdhouse motif in a lot of his art. And so he perseverates. He does something over and over again, and this is maybe because it gave him some satisfaction or some joy to do that. He also, as you see on the slide, loved fences, and he painted fences. He loved to build fences, and he loved to paint them in later days. One of Dad's best friend, a co-worker in the sawmill, Mr. Albert Corder from Pickens County, is seen here in this slide with my dad. They loved each other all their lives. Mr. Albert, an African-American man, Dad, a Caucasian man, and they just continued to be brothers throughout their lives. And so this relationship was very important to my dad. In late-stage Alzheimer's disease, Dad paints, as you see here, a picture of Albert and him pulling a crosscut saw like they had so many years ago. And when I asked Dad who this was, he just put his hand on Mr. Albert and cried when I said, "It's Mr. Albert, isn't it, Dad?" He knew who it was. He couldn't tell me, but that relationship was very important to him and continued to be a source of strength and comfort for my dad as he moved through Alzheimer's disease. Dad's most famous, well-known, I'll say well-known, piece of art, we call it the Blue Collage. You see it here. The Blue Collage contains images of Dad's life and, in fact, is an abstract representation, I think, of my dad's life, home, and parents. You can see in this painting an upside-down crosscut saw coming out of a high-top shoe in which is a cross with a hat on it. My grandfather, Big Daddy Lester, you can see in this slide, I've got some arrows drawn for you. Big Daddy Lester Potts Sr. always wore a hat. He was a man of faith, and he always wore high-top brogans, which my dad pulled up on as a little boy. He also was my dad's sewing partner. So you can see that that is an abstract of my grandfather that Dad painted at late-stage Alzheimer's disease, unable to tell us what he was painting. You also see images of birdhouses, fences, leaves, trees, saws. All of these are early images of my dad's life. The important point being that Dad was still in there. Conventionally, he didn't look, maybe act like he used to, but he was still there expressing himself through art. One of the things that happened with me is that I started writing poetry inspired by Dad's art. I'd never written a poem in my life, but I looked at some of Dad's art and it made me want to create as well. It also gave me a creative outlet to help me with Dad's Alzheimer's, so I started writing. Looking at Dad's art somehow taps into deep memories that I have as a little boy growing up with my mother and dad. I was an only child, and we had lots of good experiences. The piece that you see here contains a wood grain theme in the middle, interlocking rings, which Dad would have looked at as a sawmiller for many, many years, and also two little birdhouses. And so you see the big image, which looks kind of like an onion with wood grains in it, and the two birdhouses behind it. So as I look at this, sort of the mystic chord of memory begins to well up through me, from my dad's grounding in early childhood up through our experience as a family, and now writing a poem while looking at Dad's art. So I want to share with you a poem that I wrote about this very painting because it took me back to a time when I went on a trip with my mom and dad up to the Dismal Gardens in North Alabama. You may have been there. And it rained while we were there. And if you've ever been to the Dismals, you know that there's some rocky overhangs where you can shelter yourself if the weather gets bad. Well, we got under one of those overhangs. Dad got in front, kind of sheltering us from the rain. And that was a very powerful experience for me of relationships and connectivity in nature. So I thought this image basically made me think of that. And I say, the little family made its way through rain. Green-wooded father caught wind-drops of cold, fear-filtering the world of the mother-nestled child. A tiny birdhouse holding 3 fresh eggs of robin blue, as spring's first shower wept for winter through the louvered nursing home window at nap time. So the mystic chord of memory, which is worked through art, through relationships, through nature, so that the art of one person inspires the art of another. In closing, I want to mention briefly a program that we started through our foundation, Cognitive Dynamics. Dad, basically, after he passed away, we created a foundation, our family did, a nonprofit, whose mission is to use art and creativity and life story to enhance the quality of life for people living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. And so one of our programs is Bringing Art to Life, in which we pair students with people living with dementia. And we have an art therapy experience where they all get together and do art therapy together, facilitated by an art therapist. The students learn about dementia, they make new friends, the relationships blossom, and then they write a life story of the person, because when they're painting, life story material comes out. And so Bringing Art to Life has created some beautiful art, which we see here, but the most beautiful part of it is the relationships between the older people living with dementia, and the students, and you see some of those highlighted here, these incredible moments of connectivity. This is a piece of art, which I'll close out with, that was made by one of our participants, Anne. We were painting with watercolor art coffee filters so that they were very brightly colored, and we were having a great big time and laughing and cutting up. And as we were helping her put her filters on the canvas, we traced her hand out for the middle portion, and she, almost unbeknownst to us, because we were so busy putting the art together, she wrote the words "help me" in the center of the painting. And so this reminds us that there is a core, even in all this art and creativity and beauty and relationships and laughter and joy, there was a core of a hurting individual. And we, the bearers of this opportunity for art and creativity, can get in there and help this person get a quality of life and help them discover themselves again through art. The quote, "The work comes to represent in the personal life of the artist the fulfillment of longings, that state of beatitude toward which the unsatisfied soul aspired," by Charles de Tolnay, I think describes the experience. So in summary, I want to reiterate that the neuroscience of memory reveals a complex, multimodal, multi-pathway neuroplastic system that integrates diverse regions of the brain and promotes not only human surviving and thriving, but also the expression of the self and the making of meaning in personal, social, and cultural contexts. Memory changes are associated with Alzheimer's disease, and we won't go back through those. For persons living with dementia, the making of meaning, the bolstering of selfhood, the expression of emotions, the facilitation of communication, the recollection of their life narrative, the generation of mindfulness and flow, and the preservation of relationships are among the most powerful outcomes of creativity in art. And finally, the mystic chords of memory which emerge through art can foster creativity, spark memory, grow empathy, bolster personhood, and build relationships, as well as increasing self-awareness in other individuals and in the human community at large. So I hope that we've been able to emphasize tonight the importance of memory, the neuroscience of this amazing part of being a human being, a little bit of the loss associated with dementia, but the way that art, creativity, and relationships can bolster that sense of self, and how important this is for all of us, especially those who are living with memory loss. Thank you for letting me talk to you today, and have a great day.